Today I'm going to be proving to you that Italy is actually just a conspiracy generated up by the elites. It's an optical illusion, you know why? And shall I tell you why? Okay, because if you go through the history of the creation of Italy, there are... This is, by the way... Anyway, Italy is not real, because if you go through the history of, like, the creation of Italy between, say, 1848 and 1861, alright, you are going to realise that there are so many moments in which there was, like, an 85% chance option A happened and option A would result in Italy never existing, but somehow option B happened, for whatever reason, and there are so many times which that situation occurred and somehow resulted in option B happening, that I refuse to believe that Italy actually existed, and to the point where I would argue the odds of Italy existing in the first place are probably several million to 1. You know, I think we should ask 3CPO.
3,720 to 1!
Okay, so anyway, I will be going through all the moments in which Italy probably should have been prevented from existing, statistically, and then somehow managed to survive. First of all, in 1860, a revolt broke out on the island of Sicily. Several, in fact, lots of them, different scattered rebel groups all over the island, and they looked like they were losing. There was they looked like that time was up for them, and then there was like a bunch of Albanian rebels, Greek Albanian rebels, who were on their way to get back to Albania, presumably. Anyway, the literal only thing that could have saved the revolt was if they knew that Garibaldi was coming down to take command of the rebellion. See, Garibaldi was this Piedmontese general, and everyone in Sicily loved him, so if he came down and took command of a revolt, then that would be a massive morale boost to everyone and motivate them to keep fighting. They were trying to convince Garibaldi to come down, but they hadn't yet convinced him. So, get this, someone made up a lie and told everyone that Garibaldi was coming down to Sicily to take command of the revolt, and that prevented those Albanians from leaving to Albania and continuing their fight against the Bourbon monarchy. And get this, eventually Garibaldi did come down. It doesn't end there. Garibaldi came down with 1,000 men who were almost entirely untrained, inexperienced. They had almost no ammo, like 10 rounds each or something in the worst cases. There were literally 1,000 random people Garibaldi had loaded onto a boat. Thanks to those rebels joining his army, his force swelled to 2,000 men, and he took 1,200 of those men, and get this, he was stonking enough to launch an uphill attack on 2,000 trained Bourbon soldiers, and the general in command had 3,000 troops at his disposal. For some reason he kept back 1,000 of his troops. I think he was trying to, like, I don't know, prevent himself from being outflanked or whatever. But if Garibaldi's uphill attack on 2,000 trained troops with some of the finest rifles in the world had not succeeded, then he would have been wiped out, and his effort to create Italy would have failed. The Bourbon monarchy would have survived in southern Italy. It succeeded because some of the Neapolitans ran out of ammunition, and Garibaldi for some reason thought that all of them were out of ammunition, which they were not, and decided it was his moment to launch a full-scale attack. And quote, "No one pretended to remember what happened at the top of that ridge, but whatever happened, Garibaldi somehow won. You know, what are the odds of that? Anyway, then his force swelled to almost 4,000. Then he launched an attack on Palermo, which was defended by a force of 20,000 for some reason. Long story short, Garibaldi was about to lose, but then his enemy randomly withdrew for some reason, and we don't know why. Perhaps the general got paid or something. That's a theory. The other main theory is he thought the British were about to intervene against him. Either way, Garibaldi could now claim to have defeated a force which outnumbered him 5 to 1, and literally everyone on the island realised he was a good general and wanted to join him, so his force swelled to 17,000. And by the way, the reason this was going to create a new Italy is because Garibaldi was going to make sure to incorporate his conquered lands into an Italian state whenever Italy got created. Anyway, before Garibaldi actually left for Sicily, he considered going to Nice to smash all the ballot boxes and burn all the ballot papers in the referendum they were having. You see, Nice was having a referendum on whether or not to join France, and Garibaldi didn't want his hometown to be lost to France. So his plan to stop the referendum was to prevent the referendum by smashing all the ballot boxes and burning all the papers. Problem is, if he'd gone in and done that, France may have sent their navy to kill him and stop him from ever reaching Sicily, and Piedmont would not have been able to support his operation ever. Meaning that the expedition of the 1,000, which was the expedition that he went on in Sicily, probably would have failed had he done that. So it's a good thing he chose not to do that. Okay, I've got one more incident to talk about. And, you know, there is a bunch more incidents when there's, like, a 50-50 chance of Italy existing or not, but I think I'm just going to end it here. Anyway, in 1959, Piedmont wanted to go to war with Austria, and because if they went to war with Austria, they could take Venice and Milan from it, and that was important because the reason that Italy hadn't been united yet was because every time there was a rebellion to try and, you know, unite Italy, Austria would come down and crush the rebellion. So the only way Italy was going to become a country was if they could cut off Austria from the rest of Italy. Piedmont had an army tiny in comparison to that of Austria, and they knew full well they couldn't win alone. So they got France on side. France said that yes, it would help Piedmont against Austria if, and only if, Austria was the aggressor. So essentially they had to make it seem like they were doing a defensive war. So Piedmont started building up their army. Every single penny they had was sent into the armed forces to make their armed forces as large as it possibly was. Okay? But here's the thing. Even with that, their army was still going to be tiny in compared to Austria, but they were going to need everything they had. But here's the thing. Austria knew that it only stood to lose in a war, so Austria was going to do whatever it could to prevent war. It called a meeting, okay, between France, Piedmont, and Austria. They were going to agree that Austria controlled, you know, Venice and Milan, and then there wouldn't be much France and Piedmont can do about it, because they couldn't declare that Austria didn't own Venice and Milan without being the aggressors. And they couldn't have a war, and they couldn't be the aggressors. Also, Piedmont was running out of money. If it kept up this military build-up for a few months, it was never under any circumstances going to be able to stave off bankruptcy. So therefore, pretty soon, so if this war didn't start, like, soon, or now even, then in a few weeks, Piedmont could have to just demobilize its entire army, and then then any hope of Italian unification would be up. But then, when all hope seemed lost, Austria sent a rash, ill-considered ultimatum. Not to Serbia, but to Piedmont. They said, hey, your army's scary, so please demobilize it. And with that, Piedmont had the justification they needed. Oh no! This is a terrible act of aggression against me and my people. Oh, please, France, help me against Austria. Oh my god, this is a terrible attack. Right, I'm gonna get my army ready. Let's fight him. In the end, France and Piedmont were able to take Milan, but not Venice from Austria. However, this still somehow cut off Austria from the rest of Italy, because all these countries in the middle agreed to become a part of Piedmont. So Austria had still become cut off from Italy, meaning that, as luck would have it, unification of Italy was now possible. And with Garibaldi's invasion of Sicily beginning in 1860, the Kingdom of Italy was declared 2 years after, except Venice and Rome weren't a part of it. It was under pressure to take Piedmont before France could, you know, get there and relieve the defenders. And Piedmont was so lucky, because the Austrians sent in a general that was so cautious that it took him forever to get round to a full-on attack on Turin, which is the capital, which allowed French troops to get there in time. And there was also a lot of, like, rain and, like, natural occurrences that slowed down the Austrian army, but oh my god. I think Piedmont probably would have lost, had Austria not sent in the most cautious general ever. In films, the bad guy always loses because he was too cocky and overconfident. No. Much more wars have been lost from overcaution than they have under caution. So, after looking at all this, you've got to ask, if any one of these things had gone differently, then Italy probably would never have been united. In fact, had France just decided not to help Piedmont against Austria, Piedmont would have been on its own against Austria. If France had decided not to help Piedmont at all, well, Piedmont couldn't do anything without France, and so the war would never have even started. But ultimately, the odds of Italy ever being a thing are extremely low. However, that's the thing. Every country's like that, you know? There are thousands of countries right now that could have existed, but didn't because they weren't lucky enough, and Italy was just one of the very few countries that was lucky enough to exist. I hope this video convinced you that the odds of Italy existing are so low that I'm convinced that Italy actually never existed at all. It's just a hoax, okay? How could Italy possibly exist? I was going through the footage from my video to edit it, and I realised that some of the claims I made might have been overstatements. Don't get me wrong, all of the facts that I put in the video are true. However, sometimes I claimed that if this didn't happen, then Italy definitely would never have been a country. And I've come to realise that, no, actually, Italy could well have still existed, even if those things didn't happen. I would hate to have a good video go to waste, so instead I'm just going to apologise for all those things and hope that makes up for it. I imply that if Garibaldi's invasion of Sicily had failed, then Italy would have never been united because it would have never have overthrown the Bourbon government in Sicily. But the truth was, at that point, Piedmont had already cut off Austria from the rest of Italy, and the only reason that Italy hadn't been united yet was, of course, because all the rebellions in favour of Italian unification were getting crushed by Austria. But now Austria couldn't do that anymore. Therefore, if Garibaldi had failed to overthrow the Neapolitan government, someone else would have just done it eventually. The only difference is that it takes a few more years before Italy gets united. I still stand by what I said in that the odds of Italy being united are extremely unlikely, simply because the odds of Piedmont Sardinia successfully cutting off Austria was quite low, in my opinion. But if you want to learn more about that, I recommend this video on screen now. One of the best videos you'll ever watch. It kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time.